questions first, and then we'll go from there. Why are we doing this play?
I said that on the way in there.
I wondered why is it so rarely produced?
Well, it's a difficult play because it's kind of like King Lear. It has the same kind of passion, same kind of betrayal, and I would say passion that's kind of like misconstrued, and it causes a man to go to the wilderness and decide to kill himself. So there's a little bit of similarity between Lear and this particular piece, although some of the motivation is not quite as strong. You had a question there? Why are they doing this?
Well, yeah, I turned that on the way in there. You never see this.
Well, it's kind of a difficult play. As I was working through it, I was reading two or three different versions of it, and I'm going, okay, what makes this man do what he does? And it starts. He's a magnanimous man. He's rich. He gives away all his money freely, and he's depending on his rich friends to keep funding him as he does this because that's what's expected of him. And then when he finds out that they don't want to fund him anymore, he turns. And in that turn, he decides to seek nature instead, and becomes a misanthrope in the process. And what causes him to move toward death, I'm not sure. But he's so disappointed in mankind in Athens that he decides to go back to nature and basically become part of nature, in death. Finding that as action in a piece of a play that has really no motivation to cause that to happen, it was very difficult for me as a director. And so that was a real challenge for me. I just came off of Lear. Lear was very clear cut, and this guy, his daughters betray him. He betrays one of his daughters, but the other two betray him, and he goes to madness and he ends up in death. That was a clear cut option, whereas this is not so much. So we were trying to figure out a way to make that happen in the process. So it was a more obscure play, and maybe that's why it was more obscure. I'm not sure. You probably have more historical background than I do.
Well, there's some kind of controversy about, exactly what the state of the play was when it was put into the folio in the first place. So the questions that kind of swirl around the criticism are things like, was Shakespeare really done with this? There are lots of glitches in the play, omissions. I think they're two contrasting and directly opposing epitaphs, for example. So you run into these places where people are pretty sure that if Shakespeare had one, or whoever it was, had one more run at it, that it would probably be a lot cleaner, and there might be more character development in different places. So, people I think scratch their heads about this one. There's some suggestion that it was a kind of last-minute inclusion in the folio to begin with. They were going to put, I think, Troilus and Cressida in, and you can tell because one of the pages says Troilus and Cressida in the front. And then suddenly the next page is this play. They couldn't quite put the other one in, so they shoved this one in instead. And so, is this what was really finished? Or is this something else? Is this a rough draft of sorts? But, as Milton was saying, you can see a lot of Shakespeare in it, right? Doing it back to back with Lear must have been kind of, I've seen that. Yeah, but not as, you're right, it's like Timon doesn't have quite the complexity that Lear does. And it's almost as if this play is almost more of an idea play than it is an actor's play, I would say. Because when you're asking questions about why does he do this? It's like, well, but if you back up and say, if you start off a philanthropist and you end up a misanthrope and think of these two things as completely contrary, right? It's like going from one to the other. Then, what does it take to turn, a love of, mankind into a hatred of mankind so much so that you're willing to die and apparently bury yourself?
Yeah.
You weren't expecting a comedy, right?
Right.
Okay. Because we just, totally ruined that, So, and I think that there's a lot to be said about, asking the question, what is it that gets somebody from one extreme to the other? I not doing the numbers and not paying attention to the people who do. And and one of the images that Shakespeare is always quick to call on when he wants to kind of test a person against a social structure is a banquet, right? Whenever you see a banquet in Shakespeare, the hairs on the back of your neck should go up. And so we have one version of it at the beginning where he's just giving stuff away, not expecting, in fact, refusing anything in return. And then we get when he goes into this crisis because, he assumes that because he's taking care of people that they'll take care of him. So he thinks that his financial and resource, his help, support of other people is kind of a function of his friendship, when in fact the people who are around him think that their friendship is a function of their economic connection to him. Like they have it the other way around. They're only friends with him because he's got money and they'll give it away. So when you see the second banquet that he puts on, Timon loses all his money and he goes to his friends and they won't give him anything, they won't lend him anything, and they won't give him any support, and they actually send his servants away or don't take their calls. And he invites them all back to another banquet, and they actually have the audacity to come, first of all, right? They all show up and they know that they've turned him down for any help. And then it's a banquet. Can I tell them this?
Sure.
Okay. I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah, you're fine.
A banquet of like water and dishes that he proceeds then to throw at them. So it's a messed up banquet. Shakespeare's big on them. You remember the Scottish play, right? I almost did. I don't know. I wouldn't be the responsible for it. It's a perverse banquet, right? And so by the time, in case we didn't notice that things were going wrong, the second time we repeat, we know that things are basically headed for ill. And so by the time he gets, and then of course the structure of the play, give stuff away, go into crisis, and then he has to go and retreat to the woods, philanthropist, misanthrope, and weirdly, while he's in his cave, in nature, he finds gold in the cave. It's almost this kind of perverse poetic justice or something. He's digging and there's some more gold. And he proceeds to give that away too, but with a difference, right? He's giving all of the folks who show up, his curses and his, kind of ranting philosophy about how evil men are, and they're willing to sit there and hear it, and he's still giving them gold, but it's almost to the purposeful ruin of Athens and society in his mind. No one cares, they just want gold. And so it just gets more and more miserable. But, even at the end of the play, he's still giving stuff away, but it's important that there's a distinction to be made, and it's a really depressing one, I have to say. While we're on the subject of cheerfulness, which there really isn't any, well, maybe a glimpse.
A little redemption.
Yeah. And which, we're desperately in need of sort of by the end. The play really offers, I think, a number of different perspectives on the world represented in these different characters. Another thing Shakespeare does in a lot of his plays, people will take on different kind of philosophical approaches. And, Timon at the beginning is kind of oblivious to, these other people's ideas about obligation. He gives stuff away thinking he'll take care of him and doesn't understand that the obligation isn't going to extend past his giving, right? It's very short-lived. And then Alcibiades, right, who is a soldier who rather suddenly appears near the end of Act
We
1.
were talking about that. He suddenly appears, yeah.
Like suddenly there's another character on stage. And you get the sense that Timon is somebody who has a sense of obligation that is very much tied to his money and his, fancy dinners and jewels and all of that he gives away, and sort of expects things eventually in return. And Alcibiades is sort of a version of that because he doesn't give of money, he gives of himself and his service to the state, to Athens. He goes to war on behalf of Athens, and he puts himself in harm's way. And when it comes time for him to call in the debt and call in the obligation, the state doesn't obligation is returned, that to operate in the play. And maybe by the end, we have a little bit, I mean, maybe we're more optimistic than Timon. Oh, and then there's a cynic in the play too, who in
Appomattox, or
Appomattox.
it's Appomattox, I made her a female because of casting, who is definitely a cynic. And cynics in those days were called dogs. Dogs are a real image in the play, and but their function is to say, become the conscience of the audience. And they're the ones that look at the real thing here. And she said, tells Times that you wasted a lot of money here. It's all on paper. It's not real. And then later on, she comes back in the second act. And they both have a really great philosophical argument. It turns out to be a throwing match, throwing apples at each other and things like that. But two people are kind of equal and really friends. They are the two. And Flavius slash Flavia, because I had this female who took the role, who's the steward, is another one that comes back and is basically the two redeems him in the second act. Both Appomattox or Appomata and Flavia redeem him. So he's not just a grungy old man who hates everybody. He's a man that is totally troubled. It's a misanthrope. Hates mankind, but he loves man. I mean, he does love mankind in many ways. He just wants to go. He just wants to die, basically. And but these two redeem him, so he's not a heinous character. He becomes a heinous character for a while, but he kind of calms down and he goes quietly to his death. And then Alcibiades attacks Athens, and Athens comes to heal. And that's the play, basically.
Would you say that Flavia is a version of Kent from Lear?
Oh yeah. And Lear, Kent was the person that was always by his side, even though Lear didn't know it. Even in the sky, he made himself in disguise, and followed him by his side, and helped him all the way through his insanity before he died. And I think Flavia, much so. And having a female play the part kind of added a kind of romantic edge to it too. It was kind of interesting for us to explore. So we kind of explored it. Although you don't really see that much of it, but it's something we explored. Appomata is balls on. She's there to constantly vex him. She says, "I'm here to vex you," and call him for what he is. And they are great friends. They're great friends at the beginning. He knows what she is. She's a cynic. She's a dog, as the terms of those days. But she comes back and vexes him and really treats him as his conscience. So it's really nice. It's nice poetic feel to the second act. We set in modern times. I look at Greece at this time, as in the United States, as all over the world. We're at times where things are kind of iffy, and we thought, okay, the play has about 29 characters. I had about 15 show up for auditions, so I thought, okay, I got to do something about all these messengers. They're coming and going. There's a whole scene where we have about 10 messengers coming in. I said, okay, cell phones. We're going to do cell phones. And so we decided to change the venue, move it to modern times. And so what you'll see is people with cell phones in their hands, getting the messages and the text and and iPads, all those things that come to us instantly instead of through some guy putting a message in our hand, and which allowed me to cast 10 people instead of 29. And it still works. In a lot of ways it still works because in modern times we still are dealing with the same indulgence and the same things that are happening to us. You expect things from people, and at the same time they don't come through. And because of that, you become disillusioned and you become mean and angry and all those things that happen to us. So the sound is lounge music, helicopters, machine guns. So it's not ancient Greece. It's kind of a modern Greece, same story.
I would say too that, part of what Timon is doing at the beginning is that we gifts and not, and taking them happily, right? So it's almost as if this is a Mr. Conspicuous consumption, and he's kind of, what do you call that, fiscally irresponsible? That's a modern term. It's not in Shakespeare, but it is. And yet he is, I guess doing the equivalent of putting on the fancy party and buying a Lexus, right? But you wouldn't know that he's tremendously poor until, he starts getting these, messages, or he's willfully denying the fact that he's outspending himself. And so, that's something that, we see all the time. And so the question, that raises is, is it Timon who is wrong here in his generosity? He keeps giving to people, and he's, completely doesn't want anything in return, or is it a kind of structure of obligation that's a little bit bigger than Timon, but is sort of like, where is loyalty? Where is, our friends just bought, our friends just temporary, our bonds, do they go beyond that? Which is, this idea of Flavia or Kent, the Kent figure, who, is going to serve him even though there's nothing in it for him. And it's like, where has that world gone? Where you would actually serve somebody because it's intrinsic to you and you respect someone, not because they're, slipping you money every 5 minutes. And this is it's a very different kind of Athens, and it's one that actually when it was first staged, too, in James's reign in the early 17th century, it was exactly the problem then as well. So you had all these nobles who were who were getting more and more poor and having to sell off their land because, you had this sort of rising, what was going to become a kind of middle class or merchant class who were making more money. And so you had the nobles kind of selling their lands to these up-and-coming people, but still sort of performing all of the rituals of nobility and putting on great feasts. And King James was doing it too. He was, inviting people to supper and having 200 people there and making people knights and, all kinds of stuff going on. So it's not as if this is just a story about Athens. It's very much a story about England. I think you're right to suggest that this is something that really hasn't changed so much a different historical period.
There's a theme about usury in this play. Usury is using other people, using their money, and you'll hear that term every once in a while, especially the senators. And what I did with the senators at this particular time was to make them both male and female, because that's what we have in the United States. And lobbyists are really picking out, and so they use their money to take care, use their money to do other things. And you'll hear that word usury coming out a lot, and that was happening in Athens as well. The Senate during this period of time was really corrupt, and I'm not sure about today either, but I'm not going there. How we use money, how the lobbyists, how the power people make us make the decisions we do, and we hear a lot about it. We hear a lot about that. And the idea of gold. Gold is used a lot in this play as a source of wealth, as also a source of causing degradation, and then and disease. You'll hear a lot about disease. How disease can be used as a weapon, especially in the forest. And there's a second act that is really illuminating about how you can attack a city with disease. And so there's a lot of things going through this play that's really, really interesting. Any questions? You got something to say?
Where was his financial advisor?
Well, Flavia was his financial advisor. She kept coming to him and says, "Hey, you're in debt, dude," and he just blows him off. He blows her off, and they finally have this one scene you'll see in the first act where he says, "Okay, how about my lands? They're all gone. Okay, go to the senators. Go to my rich friends. They do. And it doesn't, and of course they don't, they have reasons not to give him money. And then, so, he did have a financial advisor, he did, but he didn't listen to it.
That never happens.
But, the characters, are they real, or are they actual?
Alcibiades is,
Outside.
and is time real?
Well,
Alcibiades, historically, yes, during the reign of Pericles.
and Shakespeare thinks Timon is too. There's some, yes. I mean, so the Lives of Plutarch, it's taken from the life of Timon is implied in the story of Antony, which he used for Antony and Cleopatra, and Timon becomes a type for Antony, who says, you know, I'm just going to go off and live like Timon, and so Shakespeare kind of took that and ran with it. So it not quite as famous as, you know, like Antony, Cleopatra, and, you know, Theseus, all the people that are also in that book. But I think, you know, we were saying earlier that it's kind of this idea, I think, that Timon represents for him, and I think he really sort of took it and ran with it.
Other question?
In any given year, how, is this play, I mean, we're producing it this year. Anyone else in the country doing it this year?
I don't know. It's a relatively obscure play. It's not done much. And it's kind of a problem play because, you know, as far as action is concerned, you know, you have certain plays that have a beginning, middle, and end, and there's real action going, motivational action going through it. This one's an idea play, and I think a lot of companies just don't do it much anymore. You know, and I think this same with Shakespeare decided that it's time to do this kind of a play because they want to finish the canon.
Trying to
I
get
think.
them all.
So, but I found it really intriguing. And when Donna called me and said, "I want you to direct this play," I took a look at it. I said, "What am I going to do with this one?" You know, it was one of those plays that I was like, I was stepping in a mysterious world. Because I thought, one, there was 29 characters in the play, and I knew I couldn't cast that many people and make it work. And it also requires 2 great big banquets, which I knew we couldn't pull off because of the availability of casting. So what I decided to do is make it a cocktail party. Both first banquet's a cocktail party. Second banquet is a banquet. Banquet she was talking about is a very minimal banquet. And so I compressed them. I started compressing. And started like, okay, do we need these characters? No, we don't. You know. So my job as a director is to tell the story as best I can. And so I was trying to stay true to the core story. You know, this happens. And at the end, we kind of understand what happens. Because there's a lot of things that were written. I'm not sure about Shakespeare himself. I'm not sure. There are whole sections that were written going, why is this here? You know, why are we bothering with this? Because it didn't fill the action, and that's my job is make sure the action continues. So, I think it's a problem. It's a problem, but you know, I think
Especially the ending, would you say? I mean, you know, if you get to direct a play like Lear or the other one we were talking about, or you know, Hamlet, and at least you know you get a really good death scene at the end. I mean, it's sort of like the very thing that we all mock about Shakespeare. Like, everybody dies.
everybody dies. Everybody's on the floor. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Timon is kind of like, oh, okay, so I'm done. And we don't get to see the death. I mean, we're expecting it. In fact, the whole play is called The Life of Timon of Athens. It's not, you know, like the death of Richard III, the death of, no, it's not about his death in quite the way that others are. And so if you're expecting, you know, this sort of grand swell of action, you know, it's not quite necessarily what, you know, we've been conditioned to expect from a Shakespearean final scene.
Yeah. There is a real sad moment. There really is. Won't give it away. But there is a real sad moment there that we do have a day tomorrow. And then we have the scene after it when Alcibiades comes in and takes over Athens and reads the epitaph. And then it's a done play. I mean, the play's done. I mean, you know, so there's not a whole lot of bodies on the floor. As you see in Hamlet, you know, everybody's dead in Hamlet except for Horatio.
We gotta tell the story.
Yeah, you got to finish the story. But, you know, and so I went, okay, is this a tragedy? Because it's kind of labeled that way, you know. And because in tragedy, everybody's dead. And there's catharsis and all that stuff we're supposed to have. But I think it's more of a contemporary piece. You know, it's one of those idea pieces that, yes, this happened, and we have to move on. And I think that's one of the big things that we come from this. Yes, this happened.
Now what?
Now, what do we do next? Try to make the world better. Maybe that was what he was doing. That he was writing. Here's a condition of man at this point. You know, how do we make it better? And when I walk away from it, you know, I'm going, okay, we'll move forward. You know, Alcibiades will take over Athens. He'll kill people he needs to kill, and life goes on, and we'll make the world better. And maybe that's what I don't want to happen.
It seems, actually precisely the point that he's not going to walk into Athens and kill everybody. Not everybody's body is going to be on the floor.
No.
Like, he's going to, there's going to be accountability, but it's not really all mankind that's bad after all, maybe,
So,
if we believe in.
I go.
Yeah.
Did you have any trouble moving the characters from being male to being female? And has that ever been done in this?
Well, it gets done a lot. It gets done a lot because even female characters in Shakespeare's days were played by males.
Yeah.
So, what I based a lot of that on was who showed up at auditions
Yeah.
and who were my good actors at those auditions. And so, what I needed to tell the story, and
It didn't affect the storyline.
I hope not. I hope not, because a cynic is a cynic, whether you're male or female, and a steward is a steward as far as I'm concerned, whether you're male or female. And servants, so the ones that I changed from male to female were the servants, the steward, and the cynic, mostly. And I've known a lot of cynical women in my life, so I was okay with that. I knew a lot of women who were very faithful, and so I thought, these play. What was intriguing was like I said earlier on, was the kind of romantic thing that could have happened, which kind of plays. I'm not sure. We didn't go for that necessarily, but it was a nice touch. It was a very sentimental touch there. I think it helps the end. Helps that final scene between the two. When you audition a show, you have a finite people coming, and for the most part, we had more females than males. So when I was looking at this, I thought, okay, how can I make this work? With the people I have, and that's what happened. And I think they did a great job. When you deal with a masculine situation or a feminine situation, sometimes you have to make choices like that, but not in this case. And setting in modern times it helped because you have female senators, you have female stewards, you have female servants, or I call them secretaries. It changes the roles because in modern times women have filled those roles very well. So I had no problem. If I had to keep it in period, yeah, I'd be different.
It's a weird play for that question because there are only two women in the entire play, and they're both whores, and they kind of come in late. It's almost as if they've managed to create this world without women entirely, and the question that hovers over that is, is this symptomatic of part of the problem that's going on in the culture? Right at this moment that Timon was grappling with. Really, it's a question of mankind and generosity, and it's not even the question of women doesn't even arise as part of to mediate that in any way, as it does in other places like Merchant of Venice and so on.
So he wrote this fairly late. I mean, this is one of his later plays, was it? This was under James rather than Elizabeth.
It's kind of, in terms of his career, probably almost smack in the middle, so somewhere between Othello and Lear. And 1605 you know, after all the comedies and, you know, this is during the, you know, after the comedies, come the problem comedies, come the tragedies, and that's kind of where this one is. And I think at the end of his career, as far as we know, he gets a bit more, he looks more towards the redemptive piece, and his tragic comedies or romances, The Tempest and Winter's Tale and so on. So it doesn't seem like this is much along in that direction yet. You know, not that we need to generalize everything, but.
Isn't this a play where there's some doubt whether Shakespeare wrote the whole thing?
Yeah, it's one of the favorite topics of debate. You know, did Middleton write a bunch of this stuff in the middle? And I can't figure out for the life of me if people have, if it's any more collaborative than some of his other plays that people aren't as focused on, or if it's just because this one seems so strangely unfinished in some ways that we want to look for, you know, an extra reason why that is. But I think people are actually working on that with computer, trying to figure out authorship through computer patterns and so on. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. If anybody comes up with this is his part and this is his part, but you know, they're all like that to some degree. And you know, these are never his final copies anyway, right? The 1623 folio was put together by the end, so we have no idea really.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much.